Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi and today I'm going to be showing off my entire run through the USPA Major, the first Series 12 tournament of the year. And I used Palkization. If you haven't watched my team report, you should definitely watch that, where I talk about the team and how I built it the way I did, and a little bit about what I would change in the going back if I could. But this is going to be the tournament run itself. And so the way this format is I just have all these games. I don't want to talk about every single play that I make. So instead what I'm going to do is at the beginning of each game, I'm going to talk about my approach to the game, and then, or what I saw in team preview, what I was thinking about, and then at the end of the game, I will talk about some things, some key inflection points, or maybe what I was thinking about during the game, and let you guys have, hopefully, an understanding of what I was trying to do without having to talk through every single decision, because I honestly can't remember every single decision that I made. Also, first off, the games are at 2x speed, and secondly, there are timestamps, so if you want to skip to a specific game, you should be able to do that. And yeah, so the first round I played against Marcus, or Chulainn. This is what I mean when I said this tournament was stacked. Like, Marcus has been on the channel before. He's a very good German player. And, you know, I think he got top 4 in the first Victory Road tournament of Series 10, which is why I had him on the channel. And so he's running a Zygarde. Zygarde is an archetype that I had a lot of experience with because I ran it pretty extensively in Sun and Moon Series back in 2019. I brought it to Dallas Regionals, I believe. And so it was it's a team that's holds a special place in my heart, and I definitely tested it out and worked with some friends to try to build it a little bit before deciding it wasn't very good in this format. But I knew how it played, and essentially what it's going to do is trying to stack defense boost with Coil, potentially Solgaleo's Dynamax now, eliminate all the threats, and then boost it back up with Heal Pulse, usually from Tapu Fini, potentially with Swagger from Thundurus, increase its attack, and slowly with Coil, and just become unkillable, essentially, and then win the end game like that. So my goal was, first off, I can't let Zygarde go crazy, so I want to continuously intimidate it. If I can put it to sleep, that's great. Obviously, there's a Tapu Fini on the field, and also make sure I can KO it. One good thing is that Spatial Rend has a high crit chance, and so if I could get it down to just Zygarde and I have a couple Pokemon, I can potentially critical hit it with Palkia if it doesn't get special defense boosts, and if it doesn't get special defense boost, if it's mostly clicking back Steel Spike, then Palkia should just OHKO it anyways. However, if Misty Terrain is up, of course, that damage is reduced, and so I did need to make sure that the Tapu Fini was gone before I could actually put any pressure on the Zygarde. So that was my approach. I wanted to keep Intimidate, keep Palkia around. Zacian wasn't too important, but Zacian was really going to be really useful to KO the other Pokemon on the team. And yeah, that was kind of how I thought about the set, and I guess I'll let you guys watch what happens, and I'll jump back in towards the end of the match. So game one, I think I didn't play well in the early game, but Zygarde is not a team that is really able to exploit that because they didn't take any real KOs. There were a couple really interesting turns that I think really changed the game. The first was when I got to substitute and then side Pollen Puff as a way to like stop my Zacian from going down to the Solgaleo's Dynamax and stalling out the Dynamax turns. That was partially important because it like basically faded 2 turns, and gave those 2 extra turns were really vital in terms of stalling out Mr. Train, forcing the Tapu Fini off the field, in terms of just like I guess running down timer, but also just like just like trading damage more effectively because Zacian is your best damage trader. And then the second turn that was really important was getting the Thundurus. I had the Palkia and Amoonguss on the field in front of Thundurus Solgaleo, and I protected Amoonguss, saying that he wasn't going to Eerie Impulse my Palkia with an Amoonguss on the field. He needed to taunt, and because I protected, the Thundurus did not get value, I KO'd it, and then the Tapu Fini could not freely Moonblast my Palkia to KO it, and I got to like Rage Powder away, or at least like force them to knock like Moonblast for a turn. And that I think was really the one turn that like changed the tide. If I had called that turn wrong and they had gotten an Eerie Impulse off, then I was probably screwed. But it also kind of shows like, okay, like Zygarde is a cool team in theory. It works really well in Pokemon Showdown, but on cartridge it is really easy to timer stall, especially if you have the tools that I did, which is like Pollen Puff Amoonguss, Intimidate Incineroar, and some ways to put pressure on it while like KOing the rest of the team. And after learning that game 1, I kind of just tried to execute that again in game 2 as well. Also, I guess one other really funny thing was the end of game timer, where I found out the night before this tournament, I was watching John Hu play Metronome Battles, and he told me that if you run out your time and also the game time on the same turn, then you win. I mean, assuming you win the tiebreaker, you win the game. It checks the game timer run out first, your time, and you still like have a turn. And so that was something that I abused really heavily in that end game right there in game 1. And so moving on to game 2, I ended up, I didn't think that Regieleki or Charizard made any sense here, so I went with the same game plan. And he led Zygarde Solgaleo into my Palkia Amoonguss lead, and I knew right away that he was going to switch out Solgaleo into the Tapu Fini. There was no other play that really made sense. I guess he could have switched out Zygarde, but like this covered for like a Max Geyser into Tapu Fini as well as a Max Wormwind into Zygarde really well, and so that just was the play that made the most sense, and I decided I was going to have to try to punish that as well as possible, and that was while touching the Incineroar in. And so that was kind of how I approached that. I needed to get the Palkia off the field and then just really like keep cycling the Intimidates because the Zygarde was setting up really quickly, and I couldn't let it start out damaging me, but I also needed to like keep putting pressure on. And so, that was kind of the idea, was just rotate Zacian back in, keep getting Intimidates as much as possible. The Substitute really threw me off because we didn't see it in game 1, and I had to like slightly adjust the game plan, but thankfully Parting Shot goes through Substitute, and you don't actually necessarily want to break Zygarde Substitute right away, because if it substitutes 2 or 3 times, then it can get its power construct form, and it's a lot harder to kill that way. And so I was very careful about breaking the Substitute as well. But I did need to break it in order to intimidate it, and there was one turn where I correctly called that or not correctly called, but like decided that if Incineroar didn't get a Parting Shot off, it wasn't going to have value for the rest of the game because I wasn't planning on really aggressively breaking the Substitute for the rest of the game. And so I needed to Parting Shot off of it, and they did not choose to Thousand Arrows that turn and KO the Incineroar, and so that was really a vital moment in that game. And so as you watch me like run out the timer, I do want to point out like Zygarde's going to be awful for tournaments because they removed the overall round timer in tournament play, and so they like previously if there was an end of round timer like tiebreaker if the games went for more than 60 minutes. Now that's gone because of the in-game timer, but like Zygarde was the last team to finish I think every single round of this tournament, either like Marco Fiero or Chulainn or someone else. And including this round, there was one like connection issue that was the last team to finish, and then we were the second to last team to finish, and I too owed him, right? So like imagine if this had gone to game 3, which it very reasonably could have had I like played it slightly differently. This would just take it forever. It's really frustrating that like the optimal way to play against Zygarde is very often going to be timer stalling it, and you could very reasonably have 3 games that go to timer, because that just means rounds are going to be delayed if people keep bringing this team. And yeah, so I I'm not the type of person who really wants to have to deal with that at a tournament, but it could very reasonably happen at a tournament, and we're not going to be happy about it. But yeah, that's kind of how this round went. Just like really effectively timer stalled. He ended up forfeiting pretty early, even though I think he saw the writing on the wall. I had the win at this point. But yeah, that's how I won round one. Kind of a roadmap of how to beat Zygarde with these sort of defensive teams. It's not fun. I don't like it. I don't want to play Zygarde, but especially not on cartridge. But that's just the way it is. And good games to Marcus. Okay, so round two, I played against Zomog, who is another very good player. I did miss the team preview part, but he is also running a Palkia-zation team, slightly different. It has Palkia-zation, Rillaboom, Incineroar, Thundurus, Landorus. And so I guess the first thing that I did when I saw a Zation is that I tried to figure out whether or not it would have Play Rough. And I went through my own team building process where I initially had Play Rough and decided against it. I looked at his team and said, okay, well, he doesn't really have a problem against water types because he has a Palkia that resists all of its attacks. He has a Rillaboom and a Thundurus, which is more than I have to deal with water types. And on the other hand, he might have a lot more trouble with things like Solgaleo and things like Dialga that I had problems with, and Ferrothorn, which is why I had Sacred Sword in the team in the first place. And so I figured he probably would draw Play Rough, run the same set that I was running, and as you can see, I got immediately punished for that. If you go on to watch the rest of my matches, especially against teams that aren't this combination, this is the only Palkia-zation I faced, you're going to see I played a lot more conservatively around Zations, and most of the Zations did have Play Rough, and I just had to play around it to the best of my ability, and I think I did quite a good job of it, but getting punished for it immediately was probably a good lesson that I had to take moving forward into the tournament. But that being said, even if you lose right away, it doesn't mean that you should forfeit. I think that I didn't have much more information that I could reveal other than maybe the Zation moveset, and I tried to avoid clicking Sacred Sword so as to not reveal whether I had Play Rough or Sacred Sword on my moveset. But I also wanted to get information about their team. In particular, I wanted to know the Zation speed tiers and also the Palkia moveset, because Palkia can run Lustrous or a Patrickroom, or can run a Life Orb set, or something else. It's still early format. And so I wanted to know more about his Palkia especially. And as you can see, we did end up disconnecting here. And so that was a little frustrating. So my game plan to try to actually win the game was to max Incineroar. I figured that was my only real chance of winning the game, but it was pretty unlikely. And so we both said that we were connected to the internet. As you can see, I checked to see if I was connected to the internet, and I just gave him the win. I said, it's not worth disputing. You were very clearly going to win that game. But sadly, I did not get that information about whether what the Palkia's moveset was. And that debatably made an impact. You can decide for yourself after watching the rest of the set. I wouldn't blame that for the reason that I ended up losing the set, but it not unreasonable to say that that was a factor. And so I guess moving on to game two, I kind of did the same thing. I just decided I had to outplay him. I didn't really feel like I needed to bring any of my other Pokemon. I just needed to play more conservatively, try to do my best to play around his threats while making best use of my own, because I did think that the Incineroar and the Amoonguss were going to carry me, especially the Amoonguss was so good into his team. And so I guess I will hop off right now and let you watch the games, and then come back at the end of game three and talk about what happened. So as you can see in game 2, I got absolutely no information about the Palkia. Again, I made a really safe play in my opinion. Just like, first off, I led really well into him. I don't know why he brought Landorus. It was a little bit of a questionable choice, but you know, I got to Wormwind into it just to reduce both their attacks instead of clicking the obvious Max Geyser play, because I don't think that really benefited me, and I needed to reduce Zacian's damage output. And then, you know, caught the Palkia on the switch, and that pretty much immediately won me the game, I think. And so game 2 also just went by pretty quickly on the back of like a turn 1 play. And then moving on to game 3, I brought the same 4 Pokemon, kind of had the same game plan, didn't expect to KO the Palkia off the bat, but you know, and then he brought the Thundurus back, which was very smart because Thundurus was definitely a potential problem for my team, and you know, the game played out a lot more defensively. I think this was a pretty well played game, but when that happens and you both have these two like Pokemon that go to Dynamax that can KO each other, you know, you'd think that it would come down to that. And you know, the way the game played out, I think it did. And I was just trying to figure out, okay, I hope my Palkia is faster. I hope my Palkia is faster. And it was, and I like popped off when I saw that my Palkia moved first when we were both Dynamax, and I was like totally sure. It never crossed my mind that a Max Wormwind from Life Orb, basically Max Modest Palkia, wouldn't KO an opposing Palkia, and it didn't. And I was just shocked. It was really, really surprising. And he KO'd back, and I was just like, holy crap, I did not see that coming. But I thought I still maybe had a chance. I thought maybe a Moongus Zacian could get me there if Fake Out KO'd, or Fake Out plus Life Orb Chip KO'd. And then he very smartly switched out his substituted Zacian into the Incineroar to get the Intimidate off on my Fake Out. And that probably was enough to clean up the game. But yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying, where like, maybe, just maybe, if I had that information from game 1 that his Palkia was like super bulky and very slow, then I have a chance to win this game and like play differently. I don't think that I get to play the game very differently, but knowing that I would need Chip to KO with Palkia might have like impacted the way I play. I don't know. It's tough, but you know, he played well and his team was better into the mirror, and so that's kind of what it came down to. And yeah, so good games to Zolog, great player, and he unfortunately did not do too well for the rest of the tournament. Like, but you know, I'm glad that if I had to lose a set in Swiss, it was going to be to the Palkia Zacian mirror, just to prove this team is very, very good into basically everything else. And so, jumping into round 3, I am facing Meryc or Michael in-game. They are running an Evildon team. It's very similar to the Evildon team that actually won the tournament, but they do not have the Regieleki, which is pretty notable, because that means that my Charizard mode is really, really free. Now, that being said, this round was a little weird because there was a repair about 10 minutes into the round, and so originally I was facing someone else, and I ended up getting repaired to this player who had just played game 1 against Justin Burns, who was of course using the same team as me. And Justin won game 1, he said, before the repair happened, and that got nullified, and now my opponent had to play the exact same team with knowledge of some idea of what we were trying to do, and I mean, it didn't really make a difference. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but like, yeah, this matchup felt pretty good in this. I didn't face any other Evildon over the course of the tournament, but Justin did, and he said he lost to a couple other Evildon, one in Top Cut. But yeah, I guess this matchup was the Charizard puts in work matchup. I was debating not bringing Palkia for game 1. I Didn't think Amoonguss was very good though, and I didn't think I needed the Regieleki because I thought that Zacian dealt with Yveltal sufficiently. And of course, there's a Groudon, so you really don't want to bring the Regieleki. So I decided not to. The Charizard was a really good deterrent for the Amoonguss, whereas if that was like a Regieleki, then I might have actually needed the Amoonguss. But yeah, so that's kind of where I was at going into Game 1. Just was going to rely heavily on Charizard and on Zacian to put in the damage that I needed to win the game, and kind of dare my opponent to try to stop it. And if they did stop it, I could figure out where to go from there. So yeah, as you can see, just a pretty clean set. I thought I played pretty well. I don't think my opponent could really deal with the damage. I thought that like the residual damage especially did really well into like the Evil Tall Grimmsnarl combination. And then game 2, I honestly just straight up forgot to bring Charizard. I was like looking at it, it's like, oh wait, why did I bring Charizard like right away? But they just did not respect the Moongus at all in their lead. They like just didn't have a game plan for it with their Pokemon, and so the ability to put things to sleep, and I didn't get awful sleep turns, just made it to that. They didn't really have a shot, and yeah, I mean that's all there is to say. Like, Amoonguss is a really good Pokemon. You kind of have to respect it. The team did not, and that was enough to get me a pretty clean 2-0. And because Justin beat them in the first game before the repair, they basically got 3-0'd by this team, which is a little unfortunate, but good games nonetheless. So round 4, I got matched up against Seph, who is using a dual weather team very similar to John's team from Series 11, the Players' Cup 3 winning team, except with a Zacian over what was a Grimmsnarl. And the Players' Cup team, that was also, at some point, there was a Metagross on the team in the regional stages of the run, and so that kind of is a closer analogy to Zacian. But in general, I don't like this team in particular. I just don't like this type of team building where you take a Series 11 team and slap a Pokemon on and say, slap a restricted on and say, okay, this is the same team, and it's just better, because that's just not how like team building works. Like, the team had very specific lines, it had very specific playstyle, and you wanted to like bring a certain form Pokemon, and the Metagross or the Grimmsnarl was the least brought Pokemon. So now that you had a Zacian and you want to bring the Zacian to every game, you have to drop one of the very important Pokemon that made this team tick. And so, like, you want to bring Tornadus every game, you want to bring Kyogre every game, you want to bring Zacian every game. Are you dropping Venusaur? Are you dropping Cole? Are you dropping Intin? Like, it's really hard to figure out. Now, one thing I will say is that I used this team in Desafio Finals in Series 11. I prepped a lot with this team. I was pretty familiar with it. And I knew that it was really bad against Dragon types. It just did not have a great way to damage them. And, like, for example, it had an auto loss against Kyurem once you dropped the Metagross. And so I figured Palkia was going to be pretty good into it. But that also meant that, like, the Zacian did make some sense because it has a fairy move and can help deal with those pesky dragon types that you don't really have coverage to hit with. So that's one thing I figured out going into the match was this is probably a team that has Play Rough Zacian. I did know that. And going into team preview, as you've seen already, I just decided I was going to Instant Amoonguss them. Instant Amoonguss are both really good Pokemon into this matchup. The Venusaur is a little bit of a pain for Amoonguss, but like, it doesn't really have, like, they can't set Sun up consistently, right? Or they're dropping a very important Pokemon, which is like part of the difficulty of using a team like this. And so if they can't set Sun up, then I can just Behemoth Blade the Venusaur, and I'm fine. It's not a big deal. I felt pretty confident just bringing the good 4 Pokemon and not worrying about it. I didn't really want to bring Charizard into like a Kyogre, for example, and Regieleki I didn't really want to bring into Venusaur, and also I just didn't feel like I needed it. But it is an option. It was a very reasonable thing to bring. I just opted not to because I thought I could outplay my opponent with the good 4 Pokemon. And so I'll step out now and let you guys watch how this set went down and hop in towards the end of the set. So as far as reflections go for this set, I don't really have a ton of things to say. I think that Palkia was just a really good matchup to their team. I think that there was one line in Game 1 that I was really proud of where I was about to sack the Incineroar when they like had their max score that was going to die to Lightning Recoil, and I realized, no, I can just switch in the Amoonguss because it has a Cobra Berry and I never will get another chance to use the Cobra Berry in this game. I might as well switch it in, let it take the damage, and it's going to be able to regenerate it off, and I think that put me in a really solid spot. So I'm really happy I saw that, because naturally my first reaction would be, don't let Amoonguss take a super effective attack, let the 40% Incineroar go down. The second thing is that I did get a little fortunate with the Earth Power critical hit on Kyogre in Game 2 that, kept my Zacian really healthy, and otherwise, it might have been a lot closer of a game. I should have gone for Wormwind. Wormwind would have KO'd, but Wormwind would have been really heavily punished by a Zacian switch-in, and I was just optimistic that Earth Power would KO for whatever reason. I think that was probably the wrong play, and I didn't get punished for it, and so that worked out. But also, like, even if I didn't KO, I think I was in an okay spot. It was it's certainly a closer game though, and but sometimes you just get rewarded for bad plays. But from there, the game was pretty straightforward, and as you can see, I cleaned it up and got the 2-0, which put me at 3-1 after this round. And yeah, good games. All right, and so moving on to round 5, I was playing Big Bad Bird, and their team was absolutely wild. I actually had some intel on them before the game started because Marco Fiero had played them on stream, and like I mentioned, Marco Fiero was basically the last person to finish every single round. And so this team, what I knew about it going into it was that it was a Swagger Incineroar with Lumberry Mimikyu. Those were the two things I knew. I assumed that the rest of the team was at least somewhat standard for a Necrozma Duskmane Kyogre team. So like in particular, just like Weakness Policy Necrozma, Shadow Sneak Mimikyu, Tricker Mimikyu. Like I didn't really know what else to expect. I mean, what do you really say to this? I figured it was also the Physical Thunderous variant as well. But that being said, I still kind of approached it the same way as I normally would, where I was going to try to intimidate, slow the game down, slow down their like aggro options, and really abuse the Incineroar and Amoonguss as much as possible, and just kind of stop their Trick Room turns from taking use. But I mean, this team is just so wild. I'm just going to let you enjoy the game, and we'll talk about it afterwards. So, how about that set? I did not see coaching at all going into game one. Just did not expect it. But I figured, I mean, I managed to maneuver around it pretty well, I think. Obviously, I got the sleep turns that I needed. If it was a one-turn wake for Thunderous, I was kind of screwed. And also, I like the double surging strikes on Zacian could have very easily been a roll. Like, if they had high rolled, I think I would have lost the game immediately. And so I got, maybe not immediately, but wouldn't have been great. So I got pretty fortunate there. And that being said, I was pretty happy with the play. They did also call the Amoonguss switch in, Photon Geyser it, and then miss a play rough onto Palkia. I think the play rough would not have KO'd, and like an ensuing Shadow Sneak wouldn't have KO'd because I had bulk, but like, again, or they were at minus like 4 or something. But like, it was certainly a scary turn of events, and yeah, I mean, that game one was kind of crazy, but game two, they decided not to go with the Thunderous stuff, which is a little surprising. I guess they were just like still scared of Amoonguss, and that's fair. And so I figured if I can deal with the Thunderous stuff, I can probably deal with everything else just with Incineroar. Because like, this team doesn't beat Incineroar. That's like kind of the problem with a lot of these types of teams that rely on Duskmane, that rely on like Calyrex Ice, is that once you put Tricker up, Incineroar just kind of slows them down too much. And so even though they got to do some cool stuff, they didn't really get to like ever do damage after the Thunderous went down and after they saw the coaching. And yeah, I think that I cleaned it up pretty well game two, despite like a really scary threat. They might have also like just like prematurely Dynamaxed. Like if they had played for a second Tricker but tried to Dynamax there, maybe they had a better shot. Maxing the like Mimikyu really early in the game when I had like a sub up on Zacian was probably a losing line. Like they went for a max play rough and it didn't even break this sub, which is really bad for them. So I don't know, weird choices, but like, yeah, it was a fun game. It was a fun game, and really interesting team, and yeah, good games. All right, so going into round 6. At this point, I needed to win one of my next 2 games to guarantee top cut. I was feeling pretty good about myself, and I was feeling a lot better when I saw the team that I was facing, because it was a Zacian Kyogre team, Tornogre team that I had a lot of comfort playing against, and thought that I had a really good matchup against. And so a few things. First off, I had to figure out whether Zacian was player up or not, and I did feel like this team probably struggled a little bit with actually hitting water types, even though it has the Gastrodon and the Kyogre and just like resist water types. Of course, the Alki helps, but I did think that this probably was a play rough Zacian and did want to play around that. I also was a little worried about the Gastrodon because it would potentially be annoying if it started to get special attack boosts, and it meant that I couldn't like max Geyser freely. I don't think my team really wanted to max Geyser very freely anyways. As you might have noticed, I haven't really been clicking max Geyser that often with Palkia, but I did want to be cautious about that. I figured that Palkia could outdamage it in the end game with like Spatial Rend. Zacian could outdamage it with Sacred Sword. I mean, not literally outdamage it, like it was going to do more with Earth Power back to Zacian, but I would hopefully like two-shot it was the goal. And yeah, I mean, also max Quakes from Palkia were going to be really, really vital in reducing his damage. And if the Gastrodon had like, if the Gastrodon had max Quaked a bunch of times, especially if it managed to get a special attack boost, I could see this being really problematic. The Gastrodon also kind of stopped me from bringing Regieleki very profitably, and so I did end up going with the Incineroar instead going into game 1, and so it definitely had an impact on the game, but it's still like kind of a shit mod, like it still is a low base stat total Pokemon, and it's only really like its entire use is stopping me from clicking one move, and so and honestly, like as you're gonna see, they max Kyogre and it kind of hurts them a little bit too. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about the intro. I was like pretty confident in my game plan, and I just figured I would let the game play out, and I'll let you see what goes on. Okay, so did my opponent set up electric terrain and then yawn twice? Yes. A little embarrassing, but you know, it is what it is. Definitely, we've all been there. It was also like AV Kyogre, which was especially notable. It like really tanked attacks from Palkia and had 4 attacks, but also meant that it was doing a lot less damage than something like Mystic Water, and not having Protect. And once I realized it didn't have Protect, that made the way I could play the game a little easier. In Game 2, I pretty much approached it the same way. I just think I have such a fantastic matchup there. The only way I was going to lose is if I gave the Gastrodon some boost and then allowed it to max, I think. And I just made it a point not to do that. My opponent did max Torn really early, and I thought that, you know, one way that they might have had a better shot is if they didn't max Flare on their second Dynamax turn, but instead max Airstream so that the Incineroar outsped my Pokemon. I guess that would rely on the Incineroar having a decent amount of speed, but the Incineroar going down right away made it really difficult for them, especially since I like had the special defense boost. And I mean, I think the game pretty quickly from there. So yeah, I mean, that's that, right? I managed to get to the top cut of this tournament with a 5-1 record. And then my last opponent was a Japanese player who understandably decided not to play the last round because they were already locked into top cut, and it is very late in Japan, I'm sure. So they just decided to get some sleep instead. Very reasonable. And so, yeah, so I ended up officially with a record of 6-1. I won every single game I played other than the 2 losses against Zomog. And the next game is going to be Top Cut. Okay, so one of the things you have to understand about Top Cut in tournaments is that, especially in a closed team sheet tour, there is a lot of information to be gained. And so if you have info on your opponent's team, you're going to be in a really good spot. So naturally, I went and I tried to collect some information about my opponent and what they were trying to use. I didn't have all the information. In particular, I did not know the Grimmsnarl set at all. I had like a little bit, like I knew that the Aleki was special, but I didn't know its item. I knew that the Zacian had Sub and Behemoth Blade, but I didn't know its other moves. And I knew a little bit about the Rillaboom as well, but I didn't really have enough information to like recreate the team, because if it was Fake Tears Grimmsnarl, that is very different from if it is a light screen set against my team. And so normally what I do if I have the full team is I will like try to find someone to play test games against it and like really map out my lines. And that's how I've done it when I have actually won these big online tournaments, is like really get my prep in. However, this time I did not really have that opportunity, partially because I wasn't like confident in their team. So I did like sit and think about it for a long time, and that's about it. And I decided that the safest lead I could do was Zacian and Mungus. This was a matchup where I wanted all 6 Pokemon, and depending on what they brought, I needed all 6 Pokemon. But if I called it right, then I was going to be in an okay spot. And so I decided that Charizard was partially on the team for this matchup. But if they brought Aleki, then Charizard is in a, especially if they maxed Aleki, I was in a potentially problematic spot with the Charizard. And so I decided I was going to lead a Mungus-Zacian, which can deal with something like a Grimmsnarl Calyrex lead potentially, regardless of what Grimmsnarl set it is, while also dealing with an Aleki line that is more due to a fear of the Charizard or the potential Mungus. And then once they see that I'm bringing a Mungus, they are unlikely to bring Aleki in Game 2, and I can go with the Charizard mode in Game 2. So that was what I thought about, and that was my plan going into the set. My plan was also like max Incineroar aggressively if I need to. And so, yeah, so those were basically like the things that I had thought out. I didn't really know how the set was going to play out because I hadn't played any practice games, and but I was like feeling like it was going to come down to like some volatile plays and who really calls the Pokemon that the opponent brings correctly, and you know, maybe it comes down to like who plays better. I mean, that's just kind of what Pokemon always comes down to, right? And so this was a really fun set. It was a really close set, honestly, and like, yeah, enjoy watching, and I will hop back in towards the end to wrap up the video. So one thing I didn't mention in the intro is that I didn't know if they had player authorization or not, and really had no idea. And so once they revealed Sacred Sword, because I already knew they had Substitute, I was pretty confident that they did not have player off, and that really allowed me to max Palkia and not like force me into the max Incineroar lines. So game one, I honestly thought I played pretty well, and I was in a winning position. And I thought I managed my resources really well. I had like all my Pokemon at really low health, but that was fine because they like did just enough for me to win the game. And then I missed my first Hydro Pump of the tournament, and the laners didn't go down, and that just kind of meant that I didn't really have any way to win at that point. So that's going to happen. I think I went 2 for 3 in Hydro Pumps in the tournament. I might have forgotten 1 or 2, but overall, like, I can't really complain about that. That's just kind of the nature of using Palkia, and it is what it is, you know, like that's just kind of the, it's unfortunate that it happened in Top Cut instead of happening earlier in Swiss when I had a little more leeway, but I mean, you gotta hit your moves, that's all there is to it, and that's the trade-off for using a Pokemon like Palkia. And so in game 2, I did decide that had worked well enough that I should pivot to the Charizard strategy, especially like, I maybe didn't have to, and in fact I did think a lot about it. Like, Palkia lines were pretty reasonable because they didn't have Play Rough, but I felt like I needed to mix it up, and I felt like Charizard was going to win a game on its own just because of the Assault Vest, and because like I was going to live an attack that didn't have any business living, and was going to win the game because of it. That was what I was really hoping would happen, and so I decided to go with the Charizard, and honestly, I thought Charizard did its job. I just played poorly, and in particular, targeting the Landorus that really wasn't doing very much on my second turn of Dynamax was, I think a pretty big misplay, and I really could have just like broken the sub. I didn't prioritize breaking the sub, and the Landorus was going for Rock Tomb anyway, so I could have just like set up sub and broken Zacian sub, and like or gone for Max Airstream. I don't know if Airstream would have broken the sub. Max Quake would have been in an okay spot too, and I think I would have been in a fantastic position at that point if I had gone for like Max Quake and gotten a special defense boost and let Zacian like kind of live anything. Even despite that, I was in an okay position going into the end game, and I decided that the Sacred Sword from -2 Zacian and a potential like Life Orb Max Quake would KO Incineroar. I don't know if that's true, but I decided that that was the most likely line if I switched in Incineroar, and or if I didn't switch in Incineroar. And so I decided that I had to switch it in aggressively, and I got punished for it. And I don't know. I even rewatching this, I'm still not 100% sure. I would have to like run the calc to find out if my gut was wrong. But like I said in my team report, I lost game 1 on a Hydro Pump miss, and I lost game 2 because I like mistargeted in the early game, and then maybe like missed the 50-50 in the late game. And so that's just the way it is. Good games to Rick. They got to top 8, I believe. And I wish I could have gone further, but I'm happy that I showed the world that the Palkia Zacian combination is something to look out for and is really, really potent. And I'm looking forward to building out this team in the future. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you think in the comments. This is like a pretty different style. I don't think I've seen anyone do this. I don't want to like do road to rank style commentary, but I think this is a more interesting way of doing it, uploading my tournament runs. And so if you like this, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know. And I'll definitely take your feedback into account as I continue to play in online tournaments. And until next time, I will see you all later.